Hi, my name's Bill, and I'm a Tai Chi and Meditation teacher. And I just had an interesting experience at my Tai Chi class this morning. It's a nice Saturday morning here in Kansas City. And after class, I was walking out to my car, and one of my students stopped me and told me about an experience that he'd had. He'd always had difficulty with the meditation part of the class. The Tai Chi he got, but the meditation part, he always thought of it as kind of a new agey, hokey kind of thing. But he had this really interesting experience this morning where he went into this state, and he said that he was struggling to describe it. He said that all of a sudden he just kind of lost his sense of self, and he felt like he was part of a larger, kind of part of everything, kind of a field where he wasn't even conscious of himself. It's like then at some point he became aware that he had a physical presence, but even at that point, he still felt like he was kind of merged with a field, and it was kind of an extraordinary experience for him. And well, it was an extraordinary experience for him, and so that's why he stopped to talk to me about it. And so then after that, I thought I had an experience when I was in my kind of mid to late 20s, and I haven't shared it with a lot of people, but I decided it felt right to share it with him. And after I did, he said, Bill, he said, you need to go home and get a video camera, and you need to try to capture what it is that you just told me. He goes, I think it's important, that other people hear this and see this. And so that's what I did. I came home and I turned on my video camera. And what happened to me was in my mid to late 20s, there was a series of events that happened in my life. One was my mother passed away, and then a few months later my father passed away, and then a few months after that my youngest son went into a coma, and he was comatose for about a month before he passed away. And everything just kind of started spiraling down at that point. It was just like I really kind of lost faith or confidence in why I'm even on this planet. And so I started drinking a lot, and I had been doing Tai Chi and meditation before that, but all that just kind of went by the wayside. It was, like I told my student, it was getting in the way of my drinking. And so, but then at some point, I just realized I didn't want to go out that way. So I poured my booze down the drain, and a lot of things happened. I turned off my television set. I stopped listening to the radio. I remember I even canceled my newspaper subscription. And I just spent all my time, I got out my jogging shoes. I hadn't really been a jogger, but I had running shoes in the closet, and I got them out and I put them on and I started jogging. And then for a long time I just spent all my time jogging or in nature. We lived in Huntington Beach at the time in California, and so I would go down to the ocean and I'd just sit there and watch the waves come in. And it was really kind of a painful process to go through because, after having just lost my parents and a son, it's like a lot of guilt, a lot of regrets about, if I had done this or I should have done that. And I mean, I'm sure my parents had the same kind of regrets as well, but as I was watching those waves come in and out, it was difficult because all these things were coming up, and I went through this huge time. And at that time, when I started making that change, through this recovery or whatever that I was going through, I was spending like 30-40 minutes every night meditating in bed before I'd fall asleep. But this one night, I did something that I hadn't really done much before, and haven't really done it since after. But before I laid down in bed to meditate, I kneeled down on the edge of my bed, and I kind of folded my hands like a little kid does when they're praying, and I said, please just show me why I'm here. I don't understand why I'm here on this planet, after going through everything that I had gone through in those months with my parents and my young son. And then I laid down in bed to meditate, and then I drifted off in meditation. And then about 3 o'clock that morning, all of a sudden I became aware of myself, and I was sitting up on the end of my bed. and there was a being. There was like a presence. It was very ethereal. It was like I couldn't describe a body or a face or anything like that, but it was a being, just as real as I am or you are right at this moment. And it communicated with me, not with words, but with communication, on some level that I could comprehend clearly. And then it's like it reached out and touched me in the center of my heart. And it wasn't like I saw a hand or anything like that, but it was, just as real as if I had taken my finger and just placed it right in the center of my heart. And at that very instant, it was like I felt this expansion of light from my heart, and then also this expansion of light. And then the next thing it did was it touched me right in the center of my brain. And then that same light expanded, and pretty soon it was just this expanding light that I became this expanding light, and it filled the room. And then I looked up and I could see the roof of the ceiling of my room just rushing at me as I was expanding up that way. And then I saw the rafters in the attic, and then I was looking down and I saw the roof of our house and the palm trees around the house. And I saw Huntington Beach, and then California and the West Coast, and then the earth getting smaller, and I could see the moon off to my side. And in that moment, I had this feeling like all of a sudden I was touching everyone all at the same time. I could feel all these hopes and despair and sorrow and all the things that people are feeling all at the same time. It was all coming through like some kind of fast-forwarded videotape or something. But it was like I could actually feel it. It wasn't like I was looking at things. I was feeling these feelings. And in that moment, I just had this feeling of commonality. Like we're all going through the same things. We're all going through the same struggles and the same trials. And we're all the same. And then I had this feeling, because my Tai Chi student had said when he had that experience this morning in the meditation, that he had this moment where he wondered if he was dying, because he couldn't feel himself anymore. He felt something like a larger presence. He said he wasn't afraid, but he had that thought, am I dying? And I had that same feeling when I had this experience of expansion. And the moment that I had that feeling, then everything just went into reverse, just collapsing backwards until all of a sudden I was like back in my body, but it was like some kind of cosmic safe door had slammed shut, and I was like, woof, back in my body, sitting on the end of my bed. And all these things were spinning through my mind. There was no way I was going to go to sleep. My wife was in bed sleeping. So I just got up in my underwear and I walked out into the kitchen and I turned on the light. And there was a pad and a paper, and it was like it was calling to me. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. But I picked it up and I just sat down at the kitchen table in my underwear and I just started writing down all these thoughts and feelings that were coming through my head. And the very first thing that I wrote was a poem. And like I explained to my Tai Chi student, it was like I was never a writer, I was never a poet. The only thing I ever wrote in school was the minimum that I had to write, to get the grade for the paper or whatever. So it was like I wasn't, a poet, so to speak. But the very first thing that I wrote was this poem, and it took me a while to come to terms with it, because if you read the poem, you would think I was some kind of egomaniac. But over time, I began to realize that what had actually happened was that I was like a secretary transcribing a message from this being. This consciousness or this being or whatever that had touched me in the heart and in the head, and because I was talking to my student about how when we have experiences like he had or like I had, it's like you see how it unfolds over the years of your life, and that experience that I had where I started writing, eventually it became like a Tai Chi book. Tai Chi and Qigong Meditation book that I wrote, and I just released it in 4 editions, and it's been published all over the world in several languages, and people all over the planet have written me emails about how it's changed their life and things like that. And I've written other things that have connected people around the planet, but at the time I wasn't a writer, and but I realized that this poem was a message from this being, and I was just a secretary just transcribing it. And I remember my sister called me the next morning, and I told her, I told her what had happened to me that night, and I said that I wrote this poem when I sat down, and so I read it to her, and then she was just like silent, and I was thinking, oh crap, I shouldn't have read her that, she's probably thinking I'm crazy or whatever. But then all of a sudden she said, Bill, she goes, I don't know what happened to you, but she said, whatever you do, make sure that everything that you write from now on, that you keep it. She said, I don't know what's going to happen with it, but keep it. And if she hadn't said that, and I hadn't had this experience, it's like all these, the books that I'd written and all these things, it never would have happened. And so anyway, this is the poem that I wrote. This is the very first thing that I wrote after this happened to me. And again, I think I was transcribing this being's purpose. And the poem goes like this: I've come to heal this world, to show men what they already know, to make the obvious apparent and drive common sense home until the anvil of consciousness splinters beneath the hammer of that sense. And from that shattered anvil, a simple, steely truth shall be forged, that when one of us suffers, so do we all. And that's I'm not capable of writing a poem like that. That I don't know where it came from, but that's how it happened. And so my student urged me to come home and videotape this so that other people could hear this story. And so that's what I did. And there was actually another part of this that I didn't tell my student, but I think it may be important to add it right now. Like I said, I'd never been a writer or anything like that, and I'd moved to California. I'd grown up in Kansas, and then moved to California after I met my wife in college. And that's where I learned Tai Chi and meditation and everything. And so anyway, I was really obsessed with writing for a long time after that, for months. And I was writing, ideas would come to me, about people's feelings and, things that happened to them in their lives and challenges and things like that. And then I also wrote a lot of stories about children and children's innocent wisdom and, what it has to offer the world. And then there came a point where I was going to give it all up. At the time, I was a shipping clerk in a corporation, and none of this made sense in my life, and so I was getting ready to just give it all up. It seemed like a waste of time. And then that night, the phone rang, and I got a call from my sister in Kansas. This is a different sister. She hadn't been in communication with the other sister. The other sister was in Hawaii at the time, the one that I had talked to about it. And so the sister in Kansas, she had no idea about what had happened to me or that I'd been writing or anything like that. But she called, which was strange because she'd never called the whole time that I'd been in California. For years, she'd never called. But she called, and she was kind of out of breath, and it sounded like she was nervous about what she was about to say, but she sounded like she had to say it. And so she had a mission, and she called me up and she said, Bill, she goes, actually she said Junior, that's what they called me. She said, Junior, she said, Mom came to me in a dream last night. And she took me into a white room and in the center of the white room were a stack of white papers. And she started flipping through the papers and showing me something. And she said, look what Junior's been doing. And, as you know, my mother had passed away just before that. And so at that point, I'm like, wow, I'd been writing, and my sister, who didn't know that I had been writing, knew that there was a stack of papers that Junior had been writing, because her mom told her that in a dream. So I thought, okay, this is too strange, and I said, this can't be real. And so I said, well, what did she show you on the papers? It's like I had to know if it was real. And she said, I don't know, there were so many things. And then she said, wait, she said, I remember that there was a lot of poems. And there were a lot of stories about people's lives and about what people are going through. And then she said, and also I remember that there were stories about children and what children's wisdom has to teach the world. And at that point, my knees are just like shaking, It's like, the first thing that rushed through my mind was like, oh my God, Mom's been watching this, what I've been doing. And And then my sister was about ready to hang up. It was like she fulfilled her mission, so to speak, and she was just going to hang up. And so there was no chit chat or anything like that. And then just before she hung up, she said, "Wait." She goes, "There's something else I need to tell you." She goes, "Mom made me promise to tell you this." She said, "It's really important that you keep writing." And I was telling my friend in after class, my student, I said, ever since that happened, it's like I've realized that everybody all over the planet, we're all going through the same things. We're all going through the same doubts and the same struggles and the same fears and the same hopes and the same loves. And we're all connected. And when one of us suffers, so do we all. And I guess if there's a message to this video, I think that's probably the message that needed to get out. And so that's the message.